Right now in Sudan, anarchist comrades are organizing in the middle of a war, repression, and displacement. The anarchist group in Sudan is building mutual aid, grassroots committees, and political education for survival and liberation. And they need our support. You can stand with them by making a one-time donation, holding your own fundraiser and sending the funds to the Open Collective, Support Sudanese Comrades, link in bio, or become a monthly supporter at that same Open Collective link. Every contribution strengthens their ability to keep resisting and caring for their people. Solidarity means action. Tap the link in our bio or in the show notes and support the anarchist group in Sudan today.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. It's Black History.
Kill the anti-Semite in your head.
Black History Month, and we're doing mini episodes. I'm singing through my existentialism. But today, we have a very important topic. What are we talking about?
Today, we're talking about anti-Semitism in the Black community. We should get a board for like sounds and shit.
Oh, God. I think I maybe picked this one because last year we did our mini episodes. They were haha, hee, great time. I feel like one of the things that feel like a gateway to Black conservatism, and it's definitely anti-Semitism.
And this is really no laughing fucking matter, okay? Black anti-Semitism and just anti-Semitism in general is a raving influence on our communities, especially something that we have to be very wary of as radicals. And I think especially in youth culture and in conspiracy culture, a lot of folks don't realize how much anti-Semitism they really be throwing away and how much legwork they're doing for white supremacists. So I think that's one of the reasons why we really want to antagonize some of this so we can get down to why we should all be in solidarity.
And this question isn't really on there, but I feel like just as like an introductory question, what's your relationship to how you understand anti-Semitism, Black anti-Semitism? How's it shown up in your life?
Anti-Semitism is just so common. The first time I remember anti-Semitism was actually from my mom. And it was just like a casual comment she made about my curly hair. And like they would always say I had a Jufro. And like I had the J curls. And I didn't even know that J curls and Superman curls, what they meant was that they were Jewish. Because if folks also don't know, Superman is Jewish coded. And when he first came out, he was fighting Nazis. He was really fucking cool. Yeah, I remember stuff like that. Then my mom would also say other weird things. My mom was a white woman who once tried to relate with me by saying that she also got made fun of for having a nigger nose when she was a child, and that I shouldn't feel bad about that. So my mom also just had like these offhanded comments, and I just remember that always being a weird thing. And then my grandpa had a fro, and he was a redhead white dude, and we're from Poland. So the inclination in the family was like, yeah, we might be a little Jewish, but not. We've been a like pretty agnostic and or Christian folk since we've been to the States kind of vibe.
It is interesting because it's like the question was about anti-Semitism, but you kind of reveal like the ways that different families of color be like prejudice or stigmatize just other communities in general. Not to say that like there isn't a specific anti-Semitism problem, like just in general, but
That was from white people.
Oh yeah. Okay. My experiences with anti-Semitism growing up, I grew up pretty much only around Black people up until like high school when we had the first few white people in our grade. And honestly, growing up, I feel like I didn't really know any Jewish people knowingly. Like no one I knew like talked about like Judaism or any of that. Like it just wasn't a thing. Like we barely even had white people in our neighborhood. And then when I went to college, my roommate my freshman year was Jewish. For me, I don't really know how to detect a Jewish person, like how Jewish people are built or whatever. And so he would say things like, oh yeah, I'm really cheap, I'm Jewish. I'm like, what? And he would make all these insider jokes. And I would just be confused because I'm like, I didn't grow up around anyone that made these jokes. And then he would make these jokes around me. But I mean, I guess I'm muddying the waters because sometimes he'd be racist to me and then he'd make these weird jokes. I'd be like, well, weird jokes about being Jewish. And then I'm like, why are you making these jokes? Like, I'm not going to repeat the joke, but I feel uncomfortable that you're saying the joke. And so that was like a whole thing. And I think some of the context is that one of my first friends in college, let's just call her, I want to use her actual name, Brittany. One of my first friends in college, Brittany, is from a neighborhood in Cleveland, Beechwood, that's like wealthy, pretty well known, has a really nice mall that Black kids get kicked out of all the time. Brittany ended up being the president of Bobcats for Israel at my university, and my senior year led a Zionist doxing campaign against student senate that I was in. And I don't know, I guess I'll just say this. Until college, I didn't really know any white people or Jewish people. And in college, the people that I knew there were from middle class or upper middle class families. So it isn't that I associated all Jewish people with being middle or upper class, but that was what I was exposed to. And then Brittany from Beechwood is fucking Zionist queen over here. And so I think that gave me some associations. But I think over time, I began to understand, oh, I have friends from high school that really do believe that like Jews own all the banks and they have more social clout than other like demographics because they were able to kind of sort of be assimilated into certain like Western ideals or whiteness. And I think that's where I'm kind of like, I think there is a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And one of my favorite Black Jewish comedians whose name I should remember, but I only know them from TikTok, so y'all don't hate me. But they have this joke that I really love, and they're in New York. And they're like, you know, Black people can be anti-Semitic, but like they really mean it as a compliment every time compared to white people.
Like, y'all really came up.
Yeah. And like that's their joke. And like they also have these kind of jokes and they joke about it in the same way that your friend does, but then they also can pull their Black and Jewish card. So I feel like they're a really good avenue for letting out a lot of tension, especially through their comedy and how they actually address things. Because it isn't just like edgy, self-deprecating comedy that doesn't actually attack the status quo jokes that are happening. Because I feel like that's one way that I was super introduced to anti-Semitism was through meme culture and online like youth culture, because in meme culture things can just like absolutely lose their meaning because of the internet and they just go to exist there in like their own culture. I was really into memes when I was in high school and really into edgy comedy, which I got out of because I thought it was more of like, now I look at it like a resistance to the status quo around me, but just also was the status quo because it's based on and seemed acceptable because it's based on a violence. Like, oh, school shooters are funny, or being anti-Semitic, or like this joke is funny, or something like that. And it's like, actually, it's not, but it's just a knee-jerk reaction to the culture around you. And when I think about like the space laser memes and the lizards own the government, and all that stuff is in the Elders of Zion.
Were you into like the offensive wool memes?
No. I think I'm just a little older. I think I'm a little younger than that. Oh, yes. Okay, yes. So when I was on 9gag, the offensive wolf, but then I moved to iFunny. Everybody gasped in the comments. Insanity wolf. Want to burn a lot of calories? Set a fat kid on fire. I don't condone that anymore. But I used to also, one of my favorite jokes when I was a kid was dead baby jokes. Because of the reaction it got out of people. It's also the same kind of humor of I have a dead mother, and I still love bringing it up in conversation in a way that shocks people. But I've also learned that some of it is like feeling like you don't have your own sense of self-worth to bring to the conversation, so the shock is a part of that worth. So as I've come into my own and found my own sensitivities, yeah, and I was able to be like, what impact do I actually want? It's like living out of spite. It's like, okay, am I living for me if I'm living out of spite of someone else?
Yeah.
No.
And I want to read you some of this piece by Baldwin, because in terms of talking about anti-Semitism and the Black community, like I think one of the useful ways of looking at its function is like kind of reacting to like the conditions against us and how that can turn folks against certain other elements of like their community. I've read most of this piece and I definitely want to finish reading it and maybe make a video essay on it, but I'll read some of it. This is a piece that I found earlier called Negroes Are Anti-Semitic Because They're Anti-White by James Baldwin. So I'll read a few different excerpts. Quote, because we also hated the welfare workers, of whom some were white, some colored, some Jewish, and some not. We hated the policemen, not all of whom were Jewish, and some of whom were black. The poor of whatever color do not trust the law and certainly have no reason so, and God knows we didn't. If we must call a cop, we said in those days, for God's sake, make sure it's a white one. We did not feel that the cops were protecting us, for we knew too much about the reasons for the kinds of crimes committed in the ghetto. But we feared black cops even more than white cops because the black cop had to work so much harder on your head to prove himself and his colleagues that he was not like all the other niggers. We hated many of our teachers at the school. They so clearly despised us and treated us like dirty, ignorant savages. Not all of these teachers were Jewish. Some of them, alas, were black. And then further down it reads, of course, it is true, and I am not so naive as not to know it, that many Jews despise Negroes, even as their Aryan brothers do. There are also Jews who despise Jews, even as their Aryan brothers do. It is true that many Jews use shamelessly the slaughter of the 6 million by the Third Reich as proof that they cannot be bigots, or in the hope of not being held responsible for their bigotry.
What does that sound familiar? Black people can't be racist, can't be xenophobic, we don't have power.
Quote, it is galling to be told by a Jew whom you know to be exploiting you that he cannot possibly be doing what you know he is doing because he is a Jew. It is bitter to watch the Jewish storekeeper locking up his store for the night and going home, going with your money in his pocket to a clean neighborhood miles from you, which you will not be able to enter, nor can it help the relationship between most Negroes and most Jews when part of this money is donated to civil rights. In light of what is known as the white backlash, this money can be looked on as conscious money merely as money given to keep the Negro happy in his place and out of white neighborhoods. One does not wish, in short, to be told by an American Jew that his suffering is as great as the American Negro's suffering. It isn't, and one knows that it isn't from the very tone in which he assures you that it is. That's just like the first bits of it, but do you have any reactions to it so far?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this kind of gets on a point that I've been harping on the whole time we talk about anti-Semitism on the Dugout, which is like the part where he's like, Jews hate Jews, where it's like, yeah, there were gay Jewish Nazis in Germany. That was one of his right-hand mans. Was not gay and Jewish, but he was gay. Nonetheless, it reminds me of like the whole thing of like, and this is something people of color here especially know, especially people who are like more recent in the diaspora is, and like of immigrating here, is the diaspora exploits each other sometimes the most. And it hurts the most when your people do it to you, and that creates the most bitter, unending hatred. And that's why I'm like, in the Jewish diaspora, there's people who have more money and people who don't. There's the ruling class and the working class, the owning class and the working class. And working class people, and like the working class Jewish folks tend to live in working class neighborhoods, especially they get pushed to multicultural ones because of white supremacy, even in lower level of standing and poor working class communities that are all white. You know how they are about their whiteness. So if you're not willing to skirt your Jewishness or assimilate, then you end up being in multicultural communities, which might even be what you wanted in the first place. Like, that's no one's in the mind of every single person, because we're all different no matter what our label or thing is. And the thing that's so tricky all the time with Jewish identity is that it's seen as like ethnic as well as religious, and it's an ethno-religious, but then you can get into it. But then at the same time, there is a whole another side of Judaism, like in Africa, that comes from like before, like people living off the Old Testament and still like having that, because that was a book that existed before the Christian Bible, before the Torah, before everything like that, and has been mixed and survived with traditions for a long time. And there's a complicated history with that, with like Jews in Ethiopia going to Israel and then being abused, and then other things that have happened, even in, I'm not even gonna say, somewhere in West and East Africa. So yeah, I'm just thinking about like the ways in which then working class Jewish families' histories is invisibilized, and like they're forced because of the white supremacy to invisibilize themselves. And I think that's why so many people don't know that a lot of the people, like some of the white people they grew up with, were Jewish or are Jewish, or like they didn't pass it on to their families because they saw it as something of a threat. And I think that's something diasporic communities and immigrant communities constantly have to live with, is like our parents not teaching us because they think our culture is a threat. Therefore, some part of us is a threat.
That makes a lot of sense. And I don't know, I think that like the diasporic aspect of it is what is resonating with what you're saying. Because I guess I want to play this Kanye West clip next. So I kind of want to ask, like, how do we approach pushing back against anti-Semitism? And I guess I'm thinking specifically with like other Black folks, because I know for me, like, or Black people, I guess like when it's past a certain point, I'm usually just like, up to a certain point, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, just keep talking your talk. But past a certain point, I'm usually like, oh, what the fuck are you talking about? And I feel like, one, I question myself on why there's that line, depending on who I'm talking to. Like, why don't I always push back? But then I think some of it, I think maybe some of it is like trying to find the language. And then, of course, I think a lot of the politics right now with the genocide and the state of Israel, like, I think there are certain aspects of the Black community that will use the state of Israel and conflate like those forms of Zionism with other parts of the Jewish diaspora. Not to say that that's all of it, but I feel like that's some of what complicates it in my mind. But
I'm curious, firstly, what did this elicit in you?
oh, the Baldwin piece. I mean, I think what's really helpful is that I like that he's situating it in his upbringing in New York City. So like a place that's like a lot more diverse than the city that I grew up in. I think the way he's talking about how whiteness operates and capital, and how people at the bottom need to kind of punch back at the people above them, seemingly. But then that process of punching back becomes this anti-Semitism or this conflation of an entire community, and like drawing those distinctions where it's like, yeah, there were people that were Jewish and they were poor too. There were also some people that were landlords or vice versa. And I think complicating that process of relation in a shared space and writing through it, I think is what's really useful for me, because my experience is like, I grew up around Black people until I went to college, and my roommate would make jokes about how he was cheap because he was Jewish. And I'd be like, I didn't even know that that was a thing that people thought. Yeah, I didn't learn about the Holocaust enough in school, or at least maybe not in a way where it's like, it was cemented, but it's like,
They don't really teach anti-Semitism when they teach the Holocaust.
like I remember they would show like what the newspapers were like, and oh my God, it was so horrible and disgusting. But I feel like it's kind of like how they talk about slavery.
Yeah, they only taught the extreme.
This is a chapter in history that's over. Everyday life, it's like, what was I exposed to in terms of like needing to stand up to anti-Semitism? Like the relation that I had with the world was like anti-Blackness. And I like that this is kind of situating various marginalized struggles alongside each other, and how, yeah, like he's speaking about the Black cop. The way he's breaking down the power dynamics to me are really useful. And it's mostly like very matter-of-fact language. Like I like in this later part where he says like, the Jew's suffering is recognized as a part of the moral history of the world, and the Jew is recognized as a contributor to the world's history. This is not true for the Blacks. Jewish history, whether or not one can say it is honored, is certainly known. The Black history has been blasted, maligned, despised. And so even in there, it's like, there's so much to discuss. There's so much distinction in there. And I feel like even that is a whole conversation, but I read that, it feels legible to me. And I don't know. And it really makes me curious to read the rest of it. It's a part of Baldwin that I like and don't like. I'm like, oh, you're able to say this so clearly. I get it. And then when it's about like masculinity, I'm like, oh, I hate this way he's talking about it. But in this piece,
I kind of see some of the ways he talks about masculinity in this piece a bit.
As a white man, when the white men rise up against oppression, I like some of that.
So there's this one part of it that I really like, and I feel like I also hear some of that, and it reminds me of the conversation they had with Nikki Giovanni a bit, and like how they're always trying to, like, I guess in their head probably play a character and a devil's advocate. Also, then I think like they get so lost in that they make up characters that aren't, like, they're strawmanning themselves. And I'm like, dude, he says, quote, in the American context, the most ironic thing about Negro anti-Semitism is that the Negro is really condemning the Jew for having become an American white man, for having becoming, in effect, a Christian. And I get what he's saying there, because a lot of like white supremacist society here and what they have to assimilate into is that, but not every Jewish person is assimilating or becoming that Christian man. And what we're talking about is the owning class of Jewish people. And this broad talking about them like that is, I think, it's a conflation with the owning class to the whole class, which is, I think, a central pillar of anti-Semitism. But I love how he continues to go off of it, because he's not just seeing it in that context. Like, he's trying to have us understand in the context of America and the settler colonial context with bondage, slavery. He goes on to say, quote, "The Jew profits from his status in America, and he must expect Negroes to distrust him for it. The Jew does not realize that the credentials he offers, the fact that he has been despised and slaughtered, does not increase the Negro's understanding. It increases the Negro's rage." End quote. And that's because they're watching someone assimilate. It's like watching all of your potential allies betray you. One of those things that the only visibly Jewish people we're seeing are the owning class, because the Jewish working class are hiding their Jewishness, maybe not even to assimilate, but just to survive, because they might be the most, what other people could say, clockable in ways that are what are being attacked, in the ways that the owning class are able to insulate themselves from through power and money.
Yeah. I think it really does, like, that part spits, because I just think about, like, whenever I hear black people say some really anti-Semitic shit, it usually is like, why they get to do it, we can't. And it is kind of this, usually based in some kind of jealousy. And that's the part that I find interesting, where I'm like, and maybe that's where I'm like,
because it's a recognition of their oppression.
yeah. And maybe that's where I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't really know how to push back, because I'm like, you're jealous of something that I'm not in pursuit of that in the way that you are touting this, and this group as like having achieved or something. Like,
Get to the Kanye. Let's get to the Kanye.
I was watching this earlier and I was like, oh dear fucking Lord.
Hey man, I'm actually trying to hold it together. You're pretty offensive towards a lot. I'm not looking to be offensive. I see your vision. Don't say Jewish media and Jewish controlled media. JM. Like, man, you sound like it sounds too much like 1930s Nazi Germany that was leading up to the atrocities.
Oh, he would say JM?
Yeah, he was branded JM. That's right. No, it's just the implied, like, this memeified prejudice towards a group in a way that's going to lead to hate. And I know you don't mean that. I know you have love in your heart.
You know what's a prejudice towards a group that led to hate? BLM. BLM took a black person, showed his death on camera, because, okay, there are examples of us being killed on camera, but if it was spread on camera, it was done on purpose by the media, because 14, 20 kids get killed in Chicago every week and it's not spread that much. They, like you said, singled out a person, directed everything on that person, right, as the martyr. And that has to be from a government. You know, that's got higher level agenda written all over it.
Yeah, they're using the death of an individual. Yeah, sure. The media are. Not the Jewish media, the media. The media is fucked up. That machine takes whatever tragedy and pushes it towards whatever narrative that gets more clicks and views and so on. Sure, and then politicians do the same. They use the media, they influence the media to tell a story.
Okay, it just so happens that there's been times where I had, my lawyer was Jewish, my regulator was Jewish, but like 8 people that basically would collude and talk without me were in groups saying, okay, this is what the tour is going to be. This is his next house. And they were making all these decisions and they're making all this money. And at the end, I was like, I ended my tour and I don't have the money. And it just so happens that that's the case, that what they were. But what I'm saying is, if everyone can say, hey, you can't point out this fact, or we're going to say you're anti-Semitic and we're going to call you Hitler, I feel that there has to be at least 1% of safeguarding the ability to screw the artist based on saying it's anti-Semitic by pointing out that they just so happen to all be Jewish. And I don't think that's anti-Semitism. But this is something I pointed out on Pierce. I said, if a black person gets pulled over with a car and it's 3 other people in the car, they're also going to jail. They're not going to single them out. They're going to say you guys are all in collusion. I just described collusion 5 times in this interview. And you keep on going back to this is like 1930. But what happens is every time if I talk to any of these business people one by one, because mind you, I didn't get to the tweet by not having a conversation. I had the conversations beforehand before I got to the tweet. Now we're going to take it to the stage. Now we're on the world stage, right? And you saw Ari Emanuel do exactly the kind of thing that I was saying had been done behind closed doors. Now he's doing it in open doors. They told Candace Owens I couldn't be on the Daily Wire. Like, you can't even explain yourself. And we don't care how you got to that point either. And that's fucked up.
They told Candace you can't be on Daily
It's not
Wire?
even about, yes, she did. That's what they said. And you know what? And you can have my voice raised or lower. I'm going to do it lower, right? Because what's happening to me by, I put in your words, the media is saying, not only can you not explain yourself, we don't care how you got to that point. You need to apologize, and you can't explain, and that's the end of the story. So just apologize so we can have Mel Gibson do some more films. Is exactly what Ari Emanuel was saying. No one is looking to change the problem that led so many people to that same level of frustration. And I just so happen to be the one that's not going to back up on it until this changes. Because you know what? I'm sorry I had a sleepy text. I'm sorry that I was 5'12" or 5'11" on Tinder. Okay? My cock is not 14 inches. I lied, okay? It's only 13.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, right?
Yeah.
So the...
Wow, he's dropping so many facts today.
I just want to preface this by saying I don't like reacting to Kanye stuff because Kanye is constantly in a mental health crisis, and they are rich enough that like they buy people off of it. And I feel like you can see that in the Kardashian show of like how they've insulated themselves and destroyed their family through it, and then insulated themselves with their money from any sort of consequences or accountability that people who care about them are. Like, he's rich enough to only be around yes men. It's really sad every time. And I just want to preface this whole conversation with saying, like, yes, we know Kanye is in a mental health crisis, but also this is their imagery being used, especially to tout Black anti-Semitism.
I just think it's really interesting how he's wealthy and he's sharing ideas that explicitly align him with like Nazis and white supremacists. And instead of looking at the power dynamic as something that is used to punch down, to denigrate an entire group of people, eradicate them, give permission to their subjugation, like instead of analyzing the process of power, it's more his anger and personal frustration than the systems at play. I think that's where the Black anti-Semitism, when it's really apparent to me, it's like, oh, you sound like a white supremacist, like, or you're explaining things in exactly the way a white supremacist would. But to you, it's logical because you need to defend your own. And that's also the interesting part of it too. It's like he's being extracted from personally, so that is a justifiable reason for his anti-Semitism.
And I think it's one of those things that, like, it reminds me of anti-trans rhetoric in the way that it's like a semi-invisible enemy. And, like, that's why Jewish folks, like, there was already a building sentiment because Jewish folks are diasporic in nature. And, like, that's a part of the Jewish tradition is moving around. And why in Germany, like, they chose Jewish people to be their scapegoats because it was like a good semi-invisible enemy, and you can call anyone Jewish even if they're not. And they definitely arrested people for being gay or for being leftist or like other things more than that. In Roma and like other immigrants that are like walking around, and like people that are nomadic and transitory. When he says Jews, it feels anecdotal. When he says Jews, I feel like he's talking about the 8 rich Jewish people he knows through being in the industry. That's also another thing that I think that people don't, like, I only understand through, like, reading and history is that, like, the reason why people, like, the myth of Jewish people controlling media, well, not even just media, but, like, and why it can feel so real in America around them controlling Hollywood or the record execs is because these were burgeoning new industries when we had a large Jewish population into the United States, and they were shut off from other industries for being Jewish, so they funded these other ones. And that, like, helped create, like, a pocket of then they were funding other media that was a little more counterculture at sometimes, and then became more mainstream. And, like, not even became more mainstream, because that's me, like, I don't know, still, like, trying to play devil's advocate or something for things, because, like, it's not even like they are mainstream. I just feel like we know ball. So we're like, damn, Jewish people are creating all the cool docs and all the good movies, and it's like, yeah, we fuck with some cultured art. I think that's really it. I find it really interesting the way that he talks about BLM and the police killings.
That's me. I'm like,
So I kind of get where it feels like it's kind of going with Jackie Wang's Against Innocence.
oh,
Like, he's like, we target these people who have the cleanest death, but we don't actually talk about how black people are dying, because that might seem like we're talking about black on black crime, which is not a strategic or clean thing in liberal white media. So then we're not able to actually save working class black lives, or we're not framing it in a way that's building power to do that. And it seems like BLM is trying to be strategic by doing that.
BLM is a part of the elite agenda or something?
And he's saying it's a government psyop. That's what he's saying. He's saying the government made BLM to focus on these clean narratives so we don't actually free ourselves. That's what I heard from that.
I feel like that grid from 1, 2 to 3, that don't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, the fact that it's government owned and all this stuff is like so, it is so to me like I've been isolated from this moment. Like since the early 2000s, 20 years now, he's been getting rich and famous and richer and famouser and been used in this mainly white media sphere. And I think it's a scapegoat for him as well. That's why I think it sounds like anti-trans rhetoric. Because I'm like, how many trans people do you actually know? How many Jewish people do you actually know that you're saying this?
Of different parts of the diaspora as well.
Yeah.
I don't know why this story's jumping out. When I remember like my second year living in Columbus, I went to a party because this really cute guy was there and I wanted to hang out with him. And then I ended up in like this bedroom with all these people smoking weed and everyone was hanging out. Most of the people there were white. I remember there's this one other black guy there. And he was kind of like grandstanding, like, oh, and then he started being like, I mean, if you actually think about Hitler, like, he's technically a genius. Like,
yeah, I've heard this a lot. He saved the economy.
And then I was just like,
what a war.
Room, and he was talking, and some people were pushing back, and he just kept going and going. He's like, he was a genius, and you can't deny it. And like, how do you wield so much power without being able to whatever? And then eventually I flipped the fuck out. And I was really drunk. Like, I think I was very browned out at that point. I don't really know what I said, but it was not pretty. I think I said some things about his mom, about his whole lineage. I think I cursed him. I just said all these things about how because he was a vet as well. So really, I was like, oh, so you like killing kids. How's he kept? And then just like in front of everybody. And then the next day, the guy who I went to the party with, or went to the party to meet up with, he texted me and he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, that happened to you. And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, you don't remember them, you and that guy screaming at each other. He threatened to pull a gun on you. And then like everyone was like telling you to leave and you were yelling, are you getting like people were telling you to leave? And yeah, I just didn't think it would go down like that. I'm like, I don't remember that part at all. Then for since then, I've always felt bad. Don't see that guy random. But I don't remember what he was like. But I do remember getting so angry because in that situation, it was just like we were around all these white people, and I was just like, you literally sound you're a Nazi.
Yeah. No, this is an argument that somebody in the punk community in Columbus came up to me. We're like, this kid's saying Hitler's a genius and all those things. But they're like, I'm disabled. How do I organize against this? And I'm like, get his face, get his name, get some quotes, flyer that shit around the city. Fucking Nazis will not feel safe in that venue. If you don't feel like you can fight them, make them feel unsafe in other ways. Such a common trope and like entryway of history nerds being like, well, I mean, he wielded such state power, and the way that they did, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And he was just the leader. Like, there was a Nazi culture. This is what I think I also hate about the school system, is that when we learn about the Nazis, we see, like, yeah, the newspapers, and then a Hitler speech, and then something between, like, Nazi Germany and the US, and, like, Nazi Germany and the fucking UK Parliament writing back and forth to each other, and how they would do that, and, like, analyze that. But what you don't see is the Nazi councilmen fucking bumbling, rumbling idiots sounding like Republicans. Like, the way that Republicans sound like idiots and, like, talk around and all this shit, you can go back to Nazis doing their own little propaganda thing in their own little elections, and it's like, whoa, you guys sound the fucking same. Like, this is crazy. Like, the same incoherency, the same mind-boggling gaslighting. It's like, oh, you think I'm an idiot.
Yeah. And I think some of it is like, I could tell in that situation that this guy felt like no one would say anything. And it's not like people weren't, but I think I was the most militant. I was just neat. I think I was just like, you're ugly. You went to war. I don't even remember. I'm glad I don't remember what I said.
Because that's the moment where it's like, you're a Nazi? I don't care. That's one thing also I think I remember from a Nazi counter demo that I was at, and like a white supremacist counter demo. There were like liberals being like, you're a Nazi. And the Nazis were like, yeah? Call me that again. I'm getting hard. And then they pointed guns at us. And I'm like, this is the people I have in my back? Are you fucking kidding me? I can't even get these people to chant, whose side are you on? Because none of them know the song. I wanted to touch on the Black Hebrew Israelites for a minute, but that I think needs its own episode. Hebrew Israelites that we can interview, from ex-Hebrew Israelites that grew up in the church to Ashanti Alston.
See if we can get a panel going.
One thing that you brought up that I really appreciated was how Black anti-Semitism and the acceptance of it leads to Black conservatism and is a pillar of Black conservatism. Yeah, you were doing some research on that, kind of talking about like Black Christianity, how it leads into xenophobia.
It's why I kind of mentioned that story earlier about me getting kicked out of that party and maybe having someone threaten to shoot me. My God, like, I just made him really mad because I'm so gay. I don't know. Not to say that gay people can't be tough, but I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean. But I do remember people shoving me towards, I think they were actually scared, but I was like, what the fuck is the problem? Like, he's the problem.
It seems like you're not worried about getting shot and everyone else is like, I don't want to be a stray bullet. It's like, can we not disarm this fucker? Holy shit.
I was like, whose party is this? I didn't even,
Here's probably his
house. Should be his house. It's a part of why I react to it really strongly when I do, because one, I think with Trump's America right now and everything that's happening, I'm really worried in certain ways about the parts of the diaspora, the Black diaspora, people that are still indebted to capitalism, stability, a certain way of life, and they've used certain social groups or demographics as like a risk to them. And I really, I feel like the pursuit of Black capitalism and then like how that brings Black people closer and closer to these fucked up, bigoted ideologies. And I don't know, I was watching an FD signifier video, and the first bit of it was about like Farrakhan, and he specifically talked about how, in his perspective, certain aspects of like the NOI's laws were how dehumanizing our enemies is a form of reactionism. Reaction. What word am I looking for? Reactionaryism.
That's what he's saying there, and like I
word reactionaryism.
I've never heard it, but I've heard of like calling people reactionary, and like I understand the critique of being called reactionary, of being like, you don't have any plan, you don't have any principle that you're really moving through. You're moving through like how events are happening, and then how you're going to react to that based on your principles at the moment, or like mainly based on, yeah, honestly, anything, like just where you are at that moment without trying to build a stability or a foundation for yourself.
Yeah. And I think of it as like, I think there's a difference between like a certain kind of Black nationalism that is steeped in like not necessarily having outward hatred or prejudice towards other groups, even though some Black people are prejudiced against white people. I'm like, ugh. And so I think there's that element, but then there's the other side where it's like, the need to protect one's own becomes, how can you animate other people as intrinsic enemies? What's difficult in that process for me is like people are becoming politicized through being exclusionary towards other people or viewing other people's modes of behavior as something that's detrimental to the collective, and how for the Black community, I feel like working through that analytical process can be so difficult because the world gives us so much reason to blame ourselves, and it also gives us so much reason to blame and point the fingers at other people. And I feel like that's where my brain is trying to like work through the different ways that Black people are susceptible to like supremacist politics or certain kind of conservatism. And so I feel like if I look at like the role of Black Christianity right now, like whether or not it's a liberation-based approach to Christianity or one that says there was a more traditional version of the Black community that helped us survive better, or looking at xenophobia, other people coming in and taking the things that we fought for, and why do they get this or that, and like that bring a certain kind of xenophobia and exclusionariness, or
For growing up in a burning house.
yeah, I'm interested in like unpacking how all of these different things show up, how in some ways some of these ideologies are based in a lack of exposure to diversity of thought. Like, I guess I just think about some of the people who still are in Cleveland. They mainly live there. They are only around like certain kinds of people / Black people. There are certain ideas that I think could, or would be challenged if exposed to other spaces. Because some of my friends or people that I know from high school that have anti-Semitic ideas, like I don't think they've ever knowingly had a Jewish friend or like had a long conversation with them. And so I guess I think about like growing up in a burning house and how geographically we were brought to this land. And then it's almost like spiritually, politically, it seems like one of the goals of Black liberation is to divorce ourselves from some of the genocidal misery that's happened here, and to understand the ways that we mimic white supremacy. Because I feel like that's where I kind of detect anti-Semitism the most. I'm like, this is mimicking another process of exclusion that is very recognizable to me. And I guess if it's a Black person saying it and I just put a white person in their place,
In fact, it might be worse.
yeah, and that's one of my, I guess, litmus tests, I guess. And that's why the whole conservative thing and analyzing the different areas that it comes forward, I guess, is interesting to me, because I do think, I don't know, we're a particular kind of demographic. Black conservatism is a particular kind of demographic that I think has a lot of reasons to participate.
And the only reason that you can participate that is intertwining yourself with white supremacy. And I think that the anti-Semitism of it is a way to make yourself fit in, because at least people like, it's like how Farrakhan and Garvey was like proud to call himself a fascist, because he was like, I want my people here, I want your people there. And that's the goal for some people. And I'm like, that is not okay. And that is not what I will fight for. That is not a collective liberation. And I think it just normalizes that dehumanization, like you were saying. And I don't know, I think there's different ways that dehumanizing processes happening all around us. And I think it's always really important to like always look towards that and examine that and be like, how do we not do that?
Yeah, next time I have a Black friend that says something anti-Semitic, I was like, do you know Jewish people? Do you have any Jewish friends? You just say this to, like, what do you know?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, it keeps bringing me back to anti-trans rhetoric. I'm like, we're 1% of the population. I guarantee most of the people who have the most hate in their heart for trans people don't know one.
Stay tuned for other episodes coming out this month during Black History Month. We have a lot of ideas. There's going to be a couple of other mini episodes. We want to do some panels between some cool revolutionaries that we've talked to on this podcast or not. So stay tuned. And where can people find us if they want to support the show?
You can go over to Instagram, hit us up at Dugout Pod, or if you really want to get into the work, you can go to the dugoutpodcast.com and really get to dive into what we got laid out for you. You don't want to listen to one of our interviews? That's cool. You can read it. You want to show this interview to someone that you love? That's cool. Just print the page. We got you. All love coming from this side, and we hope to catch y'all in the good spirits in the next one. Stay safe, stay dangerous.
Hey Hey listeners, The Dugout is all about sharing Black radical history and ideas to spark learning and action. If you've gained anything from these conversations, especially if you think we're cute, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps us cover production costs, bringing on our amazing guests, getting Jordan all cozy before they smoke their little doobie before each episode, and beyond. Plus, you'll get early access to interviews and exclusive reading episodes. Head to patreon.com/thedugoutpod to join us and keep this work going.